We'll jump into today's episode right after this announcement. For over 13 years, something remarkable has been happening. Rural hospitals and other small healthcare organizations that have partnered with Capstone have been achieving results and forming workplace cultures that even we are blown away by. It is truly a game changer when rural hospitals are the provider of choice and employer of choice so they can keep care local and margins strong. Far more healthcare organizations need to experience what's possible. That's why we're stepping forward in a bigger way, expanding our team of experts, expanding our capabilities by adding a strategic planning division to expand our ability to help even more rural hospitals and other healthcare organizations in 2026 and beyond. Capstone will continue to be the partner that small healthcare organizations can count on to meet them where they're at and guide them towards a stronger future. You can learn more at capstoneleadership.net. So we need to know as a healthcare organization if we want better results, and we're not going to get that by working longer and harder because that hasn't been working for us. We need to know what to do differently. We need to work differently, not longer and harder. We need to know what that means to work differently as leaders and staff. And then, really, maybe most importantly, is helping people be able to do that new work, right? To make that change of we used to do it this way, and now we're going to be competent and consistent in doing it in this new, better way. Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzlaff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage. Welcome back to another episode of Culture Change RX, the podcast where we talk about the people side of healthcare and what it really takes to build strong, sustainable healthcare organizations. I'm Sue Tetzlaff, and today I want to talk about something I see constantly in healthcare organizations, especially in small and rural hospitals where our team spends most of its time. It's this belief that the solution to our challenges, big and small, is to work harder and longer. So longer hours, taking work home at night, working on the weekends. Even if we're not really technically working, we're thinking about it all the time, right? So we're putting this layer of extra work and longer hours on top of already stretched teams and leaders. And yet, despite all that effort, it's really I'm sure just frustrating for many healthcare executives and leaders and staff the same to see that results may not be moving, right? Results are often staying pretty much the same. So despite a lot of effort and even longer, harder work and effort, results may be not moving. People are getting tired, burned out as well along the way. So our results are staying the same. And we're also getting the downside of all of that extra work and effort. So today I want to challenge a deeply embedded belief in healthcare, and that's that better results comes from doing more, that it means working harder. And we hear that phrase, right? Working smarter, not harder. And there's a lot of truth to that idea that we can work smarter, not harder. Because in reality, sustainable success doesn't come from changing how much we work, it comes from changing how we work. So the real problem that I see is that healthcare organizations that may be deemed as underperforming or even just stuck maybe just stuck at good or fine or okay. This is happening because they're doing the same work in the same way inside the same systems and, keeping their hopes up for a different, better outcome. And you've probably heard this quote, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That quote comes up in leadership and even healthcare leadership all the time because there's probably a lot of truth to it. We say things in healthcare like we need better engagement, we need stronger leaders, we need a more safe and satisfying patient experience, we need better employee morale and retention. But then we try to achieve those outcomes without changing the way the organization operates and the way that people behave. And that's where organizations get stuck because you can't get better culture with the same leadership behaviors and actions. You can't get better engagement, employee or patient, with the same systems you've been operating in the past. You can't get better outcomes by repeating old processes harder or more aggressively. At some point, effort stops being the issue. Design becomes the issue. Design becomes the solution. So here's the shift I want to offer for you as healthcare executives today is that results don't come from effort alone. That organizations that truly improve and grow year after year aren't likely working harder than you. They're working differently. They know what matters most. They know what behaviors support the outcomes and the changes they want to see. They know what systems are needed and will reinforce it. And they know how to make it repeatable in cycles and systems year after year to continually improve and grow. This is why we've always done it this way is one of the most dangerous phrases in healthcare because it usually means we haven't examined this in years or we're doing it out of habit, not specific strategy. And maybe we don't have a better system or we don't even know how to get there to find a better system. So we're just sticking with the old one. And some of this is just rooted in the fact that we know that humans don't like to change, right? We like the familiar. We like things that are the same. Even if the results aren't great, we're pretty married to what's familiar and routine for us. And when that happens, organizations unintentionally might be designing systems or cultures where people are burning out, silos are created, and maybe we're relying on heroics for those very few blips we see in improvements here and there that spark up in our organizations, that's really a reliance on heroics or individuals instead of really a systematic organization wide opportunity that's capitalized on that we can get that kind of improvement across the board with great consistency. And so in our work at Capstone, we've learned that transformation happens when organizations focus on really two things: knowing what to do differently and knowing how to help people become competent and consistent in doing that thing differently, right? That's it. So first, really focusing on what to do differently, right? What do we need to do in leadership that gets better results? What do staff need to do to create safer, more satisfying care? What do we need to do? What is the solution that turns our primary and secondary markets into loyal and raving community members who support the local healthcare system, right? And will use it and recommend it to others and speak positively about it in the community. We have to know what it is that we need to do differently to get those kind of results. And what we know is many of the things of what to do differently involves high standards. What are those standards specifically that move the mark on safe and satisfying care? What are the practices that move the mark on leadership to create a culture where employees are highly engaged and empowered and contributing to the organization, always getting better and growing and improving? What is it that we need to do to set and achieve goals to make that growth, make those improvements happen? And what is it that we need to do to be able to change with more speed and ease without so much angst and overwhelm and resistance? So we need to know as a healthcare organization if we want better results, and we're not going to get that by working longer and harder because that hasn't been working for us. We need to know what to do differently. We need to work differently, not longer and harder. We need to know what that means to work differently as leaders and staff. And then, really, maybe most importantly, is helping people be able to do that new work, right? To make that change of we used to do it this way, and now we're going to be competent and consistent in doing it in this new, better way. And this is the part that most organizations miss, right? They may have the best ideas. They may know what to do differently in leadership. They might know what to do differently in nursing and ancillary services and overall for staff to provide safer, more satisfying care. They may know what to do differently, but how do we shepherd the process of helping each of those leaders, each of those staff members, each of those providers be able to embrace and adopt and become competent and consistent in that new, better way versus just, that old way? We've always done it this old way. So we really do, as an organization, need to understand how to do this and then take the steps to make this happen. So we need to invest in helping people learn the new, better way, practice it, give them feedback, help them repeat it, and remove barriers to creating those new habits so they can get consistent and repeat it in all the situations where they should be behaving in these new, better ways, and even optimize it, right? So competence in the new, better way doesn't come from just writing a new policy or a protocol or sending out a memo or communicating something in a staff meeting. Competence doesn't come from that. Developing that competence, introducing that change, helping people say, I'm going to stop doing it this way and start doing it this new, better way so we can get new, better results. That is a process. And we can systematize that as an organization. There are proven systems that help us navigate this process of change and engage our leaders and our staff in the process of leading that change, understanding how to make it happen and leading that for the organization. And when organizations get this right, it's just amazing to watch what happens. The work gets easier. In fact, many of these organizations start to grow. So there's actually more patients. There's actually more bills to process. The rooms have to be turned over more. So there's more housekeeping, et cetera. So even though the volume of work might go up, the overall sense of work is that it gets easier. Engagement increases, results start to accelerate, even if we were stuck or going in the wrong direction in our results in the past. And certainly people feel more supported in their efforts to grow and improve, and then feel more confident and capable in their work. They really know what the expectations are, and they're set up for success to meet those expectations. And actually, what we've come to learn is that many organizations, many small and rural hospitals in particular, they do need outside help with this. And here's something I say often, and I say it with humility. Most organizations need better systems and the support in setting up those systems and optimizing those systems to help the leaders, help the staff in their organization to do things in new, better ways that gets new, better results ongoingly for the organization. So an outside partnership can matter a lot in helping an organization do this, not because the internal leaders aren't capable, But because starting from scratch is actually exhausting, right? It takes way more time, takes way more effort. There's way more risk that you might get it wrong. And actually, I know this from my own work as an executive in my own community hospital is that our executive team and then a steering team of other leaders and providers, it took us 3 years to try to strategize around what are the new, better ways. And then it took us 3 years of trial and error to try to test and implement and customize those new, better ways to be able to get better results. So it took us 6 years really to be able to get done what now through our work at Capstone and our proven approach, our framework, our formula, our 4 systems, we now know that organizations can accomplish this type of transformation in their systems and then in their results in about 26 to 27 months. So that's because these systems now we know what they are, right? They already exist. The framework is proven, the path is clear, and the guesswork is removed. So, really, it's about make it yours, make it better, and customizing it and sequencing it specifically based on your organization's assessed current state, which, of course, we help with that assessment piece. And then we also help with the customization piece to customize these proven systems so you're not reinventing the wheel. And that's the difference between trying to change and being equipped to change. I remember that, like when I was a healthcare executive in a community hospital, this reminds me of the example of just changing one policy, right? So if we needed to change, let's say, a clinical policy that impacts both providers and nurses, and I was the chief nursing officer, I would work with the medical staff leadership to maybe update policies to the new, better way to take care of patients. For example, maybe we need to change a policy on how we're caring for sepsis patients, for example. And it's way easier to go into one of those sessions where we're going to be working on deciding what that new, better way is if we start with maybe a draft of a policy or protocol from somebody else, maybe even from the outside, maybe another organization that has great outcomes in sepsis care. Maybe we copy their example and we start with that instead of starting with a blank piece of paper saying, how are we going to better care for our sepsis patients? Let's figure that out and let's write it down and commit to a new, better way. It's way easier to start with an outside proven example and then be able to say, how might that be different for us? And what would we need to do to make it ours and maybe even make it better? And so that's the difference and the speed and the ease that gets us faster to the new, better way is to not start with a blank piece of paper. My organization did kind of start with a blank piece of paper when we needed to elevate people, service, quality, finance, and growth pillars all at the same time in our organization. We were really starting with, we couldn't even look at our old plans because we knew that they weren't getting the results we wanted. So we kind of went to, you might have heard if you're in the finance world, zero-based budgeting, where you don't start with what you had before. You start with a blank, spreadsheet and you build the budget, not by saying we're going to increase so much from last year, decrease so much from last year, but we're just starting from zero and we're just going to build this budget right from the start as if it's the very first budget we've ever had. And we know that that's a longer process, right? That's going to be a longer process. And it's not really always necessary. And that's why we rarely work in that way when making small and especially very large changes in our organization. So let me leave you with this today, this big takeaway. If your organization is looking for better engagement, better outcomes, better retention, better performance, the answer is not work harder and longer. The answer is work differently. Because when you change how the work works, everything else begins to change. And that's how organizations become the provider of choice, the employer of choice, and trusted community anchors and assets. If today's episode resonated with you, especially if you're feeling the tension between wanting better results and not wanting to exhaust your people, I'd encourage you to connect with us. At Capstone, we help healthcare organizations clarify what's most important, build systems that support execution, and create lasting, sustainable improvement and growth. You don't have to start from a blank page. You don't have to figure it out all on your own. You just need a better way forward. Thanks for listening to Culture Change RX. And as always, stay committed to building the kind of organization that your people and community deserve. We very much hope that this podcast is part of helping you do just that. And also, please think about who in your network, in your organization, in your colleague network, who might benefit from hearing an episode of Culture Change RX. And if it's this one, please do pass it along. I know that when a friend or a colleague recommends an episode of a podcast to me, it's the next one that I listen to on my next walk or when I'm on the stationary bike. So that's when I love to listen to podcasts. So please do share it with a colleague or someone in your organization. Thank you. And tune in next week, every Wednesday for another episode of Culture Change RX. Bye now. Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.